Hi. Hello. Hi. Hi guys. Hi Anisha. Anisha, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me clearly? Give me a thumbs up guys if you can hear me clearly. Hi. 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 Shubhendu's joined us. Hello everyone.
Cool. Thanks, Anisha. Okay, guys, so welcome to another live session with us, where we are basically talking about topics of, related to sustainable architecture. In these sessions, we are really trying. Hi, Srubendu. So
Hello.
thanks for joining us. I'll
Pleasure.
just quickly give an intro and then we can jump right into it. Okay. So I was just saying that we are doing a bunch of live sessions. It kind of has have started very inorganically, but we're talking about topics related to sustainable architecture. And in these sessions, we're really trying to go deep into sustainable concepts, techniques, and materials. We're also talking about the pros and cons, the how-tos of implementation, as well as the challenges. And the idea really is to go beyond the aesthetics and pretty pictures and really focus on, the meat of what it takes to build sustainable architecture and contribute positively towards sustainability. I also feel that some of this kind of meaty information is missing in the architectural curriculum, and it's also difficult to come by when you're practicing as an architect. So the idea is to really demystify some of these concepts. In the past, we've had sessions on topics such as rainwater harvesting, ecological planning. I don't know, Shubhendu, if you've had a chance to see any of these. We've talked about evaporative cooling, and we've also talked about using natural building materials in our projects. Today, everyone, we're talking to Shubhendu Sharma from A-Forest, which is a Bangalore-based organization. And we're going to be talking about rewilding, in urban and rural areas. We'll be talking about growing forests from scratch. And Shubhendu is the founder of A Forest, and which basically pioneers this concept of building forests using the Miyawaki method. He started his career as an industrial engineer and was working at Toyota when he actually had, the opportunity to meet with, Mr. Akira Miyawaki, who had come to the plant to build a forest there. Um, and Shubhendu was smitten. He interned with Miyawaki-san after that and learned the method and has since been growing forests in India and abroad. There is a lovely thing that you say, Shubhendu, on your website. Um, Today, A-Forest promotes a standardized method of seeding dense, fast-growing native forests in barren lands. And Shubhendu says that he's basically he can grow a multi-layer forest of 300 trees in an area as, small as parking spaces for 6 cars for less than the price of an iPhone. So that is like, I think a huge statement. And if that is possible, then we should just have forests and trees all around us. Why not? So without further chatting from me, I'll open it up to Shubhendu. Shubhendu, welcome.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure joining you on this Instagram live. Hello, everyone.
Wonderful. Yeah. So we asked in our stories, we asked people to send us questions. So we've gathered a bunch of questions, and you'll see the depth of interest by the kind of questions we've had. They're not just simple questions; they're complex questions. So I'm quite excited. But to begin, can you tell us briefly, what does A-Forest do? What is this method, Miyawaki method of creating forests, and how can it help us?
Okay, so A-Forest is a company that specializes in converting barren patches of lands into forest, a forest that would have grown at that particular place a few thousand years ago. So we don't work in those places which are naturally not a forest. Most of the habitable world we live in today would have been a forest long time ago. I mean, we live at only those places where we have clean water, breathable air, and food around us. And these inputs for sustenance of human life, they come from natural resources. Just nothing but trees and the plants, the vegetation on which we are so much dependent on. Because we as animals can't photosynthesize and make our own food. We have to be dependent on the vegetation. So the idea is to identify the potential natural vegetation of a particular place, the vegetation of which nature has an inbuilt potential to bring it back on its own, and amplify the process of succession so that what nature will take maybe 300 years to regrow, we can do it in maybe 10 to 25 years. So that's what our company does.
And how do you do that?
Okay, the first step is to identify the potential natural vegetation. Right now, if we want to make a forest anywhere in the world, we can easily make a forest of whatever is available in the nurseries around us. But that won't be the forest which would have existed at that particular place maybe in 2000 years ago. What we should respect is that the nature already knows what is the best suited species for a particular place. And if the species has evolved at that particular place, it is naturally the best suited species of that geography. So somehow, I don't know whether we have enough of remaining forests in different parts of the world that we can go and learn what is the natural vegetation, but somehow we have to identify this natural vegetation, map it so that we can pinpoint and say, okay, this is Singapore. In Singapore, this is the list of species of trees, which is the potential natural vegetation of Singapore. And now our task would be to collect the seeds of these species of trees from the mother trees growing in the forest and germinate seedlings out of them. And then whatever we have surveyed, maybe in an island like Borneo or Indonesia, nearby places of Singapore, which is an urban place, bring that template from there and paste it. So the same ratios of trees that we would have found in our forest survey, collected from the same mother trees growing in the deep jungle. And when you do that, you create kind of a window that opens up in the past, the historical, the natural past of that particular place, and you grow an authentic forest in middle of a city. The moment that happens, every single life form, whether it's microbes, whether it's birds, whether it's mammals, they start to come back to this forest because that's where their food, shelter, habitat is. So by bringing back a lost natural forest, we are going to fix the environment, the ecosystem, the ecology of a particular place, which would have been lost in maybe during the cultural
Urbanization.
yeah, the cultural changes. For an example, a country like India, we have been ruled over by so many different cultures, and not just ruled over, we are a mix of so many different cultures that it's really hard to find out what is native and what's not. To give you an
True.
example, tamarind is a non-native tree to India.
Okay, that's shocking to me.
Yeah. And the botanical name itself is also Tamarindus indica,
Mm,
because during the colonial times, trees were given that nomenclature, and that's when they found this tree first in India before they would have found it in Africa, the original place where it came from. And they called it Tamarindus indica. So the irony is, though it's native to somewhere in Madagascar or Africa, I don't know, but in that country also it's known as Tamarindus indica. Or Gulmohar, for an example, the name sounds so Indian, but
Yeah.
it's a non-native
So,
Latin
but this
American.
is, this is kind of making things difficult for people, right? Like for us, for like people who want to do, practice sustainable architecture. We want to use these techniques to kind of, enhance our footprint when it comes to sustainability. But the fact that, you're saying that go back and figure out what was really native and what was really indigenous, because that would thrive. I mean, I'm thinking that you're saying this because that would thrive on its own, and that would actually be the real, sort of forest that is required for the indigenous biodiversity and all that. But then, if it's so difficult to find it out, then how can all of us do this?
So we might have taken the baby step, the first step of doing it for city of Bangalore, doing it for Hyderabad, doing it for Goa. We are doing a project now. Singapore, we have planted a forest in the zoo. So whenever we have a project, the first requirement itself is to develop that list of species. And the good news is that the species of the potential natural vegetation, once it's developed, it's everything can be built upon that. We will have a base. We can say, okay, these are the 25 species we are 100% sure about, that they are native to this particular place. Whatever happens after that could be that even if a single tree is planted in that region, at least it should come out of the 25 or 30 species which has been identified during that milestone project, when the first forest at a particular place is being made. We have seen it happening at least in India, when Dr. Miyawaki planted his first forest in 2009. Since then, number of forests have been planted. More than 1,000 forests, I believe, have been planted using Miyawaki method all over the country. And not all of them would be perfect. I planted a Gulmohar in the first forest that I made in the backyard of my own house, my experiment. And these are the kind of mistakes everybody would be making. But project after project, it's going to be refined, and eventually it will reach a stage where we'll be planting the ideal
Right, usually.
potential natural vegetation. So
But what
it's a
is the harm? I mean, let me just ask you, what is the harm of planting a gulmohar or a tamarind? Because they're clearly, I mean, I think that is true with so many things, right? Like you're saying, like we have this huge colonial past. We also have, even before that, we had the Mughals coming in from Persia. Like we had all these invaders coming in. So they brought, things with them now which are integrated into the Indian culture. So, what is the harm of actually planting something like gulmohar or tamarind?
Yeah. So let's take, I'll take three species. One is Australian eucalyptus, because
Mm-hmm.
that's the most widespread, irrespective of wherever people are joining for this Instagram live. Probably they would have seen a eucalyptus in their life, though it's just native to Australia. The island of Australia is where the eucalyptuses should ideally grow. But now,
Right.
because they are in Africa, they are in the Middle East, they are in India, they are in San Francisco, all the places, eucalyptus is growing and dominating. And the
Hmm.
way it dominates is that the leaves that fall on the ground releases a toxin which does not allow any other species to grow around it. That's the biggest harm. Because by bringing in a non-native tree, we are not enhancing the biodiversity of a particular place. It's not like one extra species for San Francisco. It's like one species is going to dominate the entire ecosystem of this particular geography.
No, so eucalyptus, I think a lot of us know is kind of this mono species, right? Which doesn't let anything else survive. But tell me about, for example, tamarind, because tamarind I would think is a
Okay.
fruiting tree. It will attract a lot of birds. So yeah.
I'm really sorry, because we are doing it on the phone. I'm getting calls as well. Okay. Tamarind is not a jungle tree. Now, if
Hmm.
you look at the latest research that has happened in forestry, I would refer a book called The Hidden Life of Trees by someone called Peter Wolleben. He's a German
Mm-hmm.
forester. And he has written a book about how trees communicate with each other. Their roots get entangled, and there is a fungi that grows throughout the network of roots through which trees are able to communicate. Now, if I am growing a native Indian forest, where the forest might look like a bunch of trees planted together above the surface, the moment I see below the surface, they're all one. The forest grows
Right.
itself as a one single organism. Now I bring Tamarindus indica, the African tree, and try to combine it with 92 other species which are native to Western Ghats.
Hmm.
What happens is the link of communication between this whole wood wide web of roots breaks because we have a tree that speaks foreign language. So to put it in human analogy, when that happens, the trees start to release stress signals. And when that happens, the health of the overall forest deteriorates. And when we are living in close proximity of trees that are stressed, we are also going to receive those stress signals released by these trees in the air, and the entire ecosystem, including the humans living around it, gets stressed. To give you another example, let's say I have brought one single Gulmohar tree from Caribbean, from Latin America, wherever it grows, to Bangalore, India. Now, it does not have the ecosystem, it does not have the microbes, the fungi that would grow on its roots. It does not have that pest or that caterpillar, that butterfly, or that bird which will help this tree to spread its seeds or to fix nitrogen from the air. We are just bringing one animal without bringing the ecosystem that makes that animal that animal. You know, it's like bringing a polar bear from North Pole to Bombay without its ice and the kind of environment in which it lives. The polar bear is going to be stressed, and when it will stress and squeal and shout, it's going to make the entire neighborhood stressed. This happens at a very subconscious level
Yeah.
in all the species. And Peter Wolleben, he says, if you look at a tree planted in isolation in a street, go and hug that tree, because that tree has been stressed in isolation for decades now.
Oh my God. Oh my God, that's sad. So did you remove the Gulmohar tree from your forest?
No, I did not. I kept it as an experiment. After that, whatever mistakes we made, we continued removing them. But the reason why we didn't remove that Gulmohar was because we identified when the forest was already 3 years old, Gulmohar was the most dominating tree. And I wanted to see whether the native vegetation will overpower the Gulmohar tree. It's been 10 years already. The Gulmohar is still the tallest tree, but it has started breaking down. So during a storm, half of the tree fell.
Right.
So I have this intuition that eventually it is going to be the native forest that will be dominating that place. I don't know if we'll be able to see that in our lifetimes or not, but because, you know, trees live at a very different scale of timeline.
So, Shubhendu, now tell us, I guess we really, I mean, okay, so basically you're saying we have to use native species, and it's very difficult to, in fact, identify what are the real indigenous native species. So that is one big challenge right up front. But just let's go through a step-by-step process of what you do and what it takes to build this forest.
Okay. So the first step is identify the potential natural vegetation. Second step, collect the seeds from the mother trees, grow seedlings out of them. Third step is to prepare the soil and make it as healthy and fertile as soil of a natural forest. Now, what makes the soil of a natural forest so alive? It's the microbes. And the microbes found in the soil of a natural forest are not that easy to bring into a new soil, to a barren land. Why? because microbes move at an extremely slow pace. In 1 meter, they might just travel 1 meter. They're not like birds, that you plant the tree, the moment it starts fruiting, X, Y, Z species of birds will start to show up. Microbes don't move like that. So what we do is we dig the soil till depth of 1 meter. We mix 2, 3 different types of biomasses that converts a barren patch of land into, it gives the land those qualities which are found in soil of a natural forest, like water retention. The soil of a natural forest is quite spongy. It can retain water like a sponge. So we make something that can retain water. We make something that will loosen up the soil so that when water falls, it just directly goes in, or the roots can penetrate into this soft soil easily. And third is nutrition, something that can healthify the soil of our forest, something which has enough food, enough nutrition for the infant trees that we are going to be planting. Something like mother's milk, like now you have
Starter kit.
extremely healthy, rich. Yeah, kickstarting it. It's something which gives that initial growth that within year or two, the trees become self-sustaining. Because
Right.
to be honest, we don't have to do all this. If the original forest would not have destroyed, the seedlings would have grown in extremely nutrition-rich, soft soil, properly shaded, guarded by the mother tree next to them. And according to Peter Wolleben, they are being nurtured by the mother trees until they reach that stage that they can take care of themselves by themselves. So we have to kind of handhold the initial period. So soil has to be prepared that way. The fourth step we would do is we would create a potion which has all the microbes. We would brew a compost tea which has all the microbes found in the soil of a natural forest, microbes found in the dung, in the manure of herbivorous animals, because they are also activating the microbes in the soil.
Right.
When all of it comes together and sprinkled on the barren land, it becomes alive. It starts to breathe again.
Mm-hmm.
And then we plant the young seedlings, which we would have grown from the seeds collected in the second step, what we would have collected. So they'll be planted, and then we'll keep the soil covered with a very thick layer of mulch so that all the water goes directly into the soil, doesn't evaporate, and the microbes that are there in the soil, they don't get sterilized. They don't get exposed to sunlight and
Right.
and,
Right.
and die because of being exposed to sunlight. And what Miyawaki says, he says no management is the best management. So he says don't, prune them, don't cut them, don't do this, don't do that, but just keep removing the weeds, because otherwise the weeds are going to take away the nutrition. And eventually the trees will grow dense enough that they will block all the sunlight, and weeds won't be able to grow because they need sunlight as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this usually happens in 1 to 2 years, and then the forest just sustains on its own. So
So
these
there's
are like
also
the
a
7.
multi-layering, right? There's also a multi-layering in the forest.
Yeah. So just like a natural forest, like to give you an example, if we go to high altitude Alps, European Alps, probably we will not make a multi-layer forest, because as you go higher in the altitude, the diversity of species of trees will keep on reducing, and eventually you will have only one species of tree growing up to a certain point, and beyond that, once you cross the tree lines, there are no trees at all on the mountains.
Right.
We have to respect that. So if we are making a forest, let's say in Singapore or in Chennai or in Bombay, we will be doing a multi-layer forest. Why? Because when you go to Sanjay Gandhi National Park in Bombay for your survey of a natural forest, you find trees at eye level called shrub layer. You will find smaller trees like kokum, amla, and then you will find bigger trees like some other trees. And then you will find huge, giant trees making up to the canopy of the jungle. If you look it from above, you will see only these. So these are the 4-5 levels that we see during our forest surveys in this part of the world. If we are in Rajasthan, we might even see, we might see just 3 layers. We'll see a shrub, a herb layer, a shrub layer, might be a large shrub layer, and the maximum would be some trees like
Mm.
Kejadi,
Kikar.
Pilu, etc. And done. And we are done there. So every time we make a forest, we are trying to fill up the vertical space by bringing in those species which grow only up to a certain point. So it's like I plant some tree which belongs to shrub layer. Next to it, I'll be planting a tree that belongs to maybe canopy layer. And then the third tree which belongs to some layer in middle of these. So what happens, we are utilizing very little space on the ground, but we are filling up the vertical space. And by doing that, you can produce 30 times more leaf surface area per unit area on the ground. So technically speaking, like a real estate guy, I would be creating a lot more facility for photosynthesis because of using multi-layered afforestation by utilizing the empty vertical space. And when I photosynthesize so much better, I produce a lot more biomass, which becomes food for the forest. So forest will grow exponentially. More leaves, more photosynthesis, more biomass, more fruit, more output per square meter, and ultimately more and much better cooling down of the city, much more oxygen, much more carbon dioxide absorption, much
Right.
more water retention. So everything becomes a few times more because you are doing it multi-level,
Layer.
multi
Right.
multi layer, yeah, in one. So utilizing very less space on the ground, we can still reap a lot more benefits. It's like converting somebody's house into a
Right.
skyscraping
I
apartment.
mean,
And
it's basically like urban areas also, right? Like we constantly talk about the advantage of high density,
yeah,
right? And especially like around, say, transportation nodes and things like that. But okay, so now I have two questions. First, I think that we are all, including the audience, I'm just looking at the questions that are coming. I think we're all a little bit like stunned by this whole like idea of what is native and what is not, and like, the fact that tamarind and gulmohar is not. So, but you did say that, for example, Sanjay Gandhi Park in Mumbai, is an example of a local, of a natural indigenous forest. So, can you just like rattle out names of, natural forests in the big cities in India that like some of us can go visit to get clues of what are
all right.
indigenous?
So if you are in Bangalore, go to Kabini. If you are in Hyderabad, go to Sri Salem. If you are in Chennai, go to maybe Annamalai or some mangroves area, which is also part of Annamalai. If you are in Delhi, go to a place called Ridge.
Yeah.
Aravali has a beautiful natural vegetation. Uh, if you are somewhere near Bhopal, central India, Nagpur, we have Kana National Park, Tadoba. Then there is a reference book called Jungle Trees of Central India by
Yes.
Christian. Use that book. For Calcutta, Kolkata, we went to Chilimili Forest Reserve. And for Jaipur, we went to a forest called Jhalana. For I don't remember the name, but there is another forest in Rajasthan close to Delhi next to Alwar. If you just search for forest area close to Alwar, you will find everything that you need to plant in Gurgaon area, the Delhi NCR.
Oh,
Yeah.
Haryana, basically.
Yeah. For Punjab, there is nothing. There is just one forest we found in Bhatinda, which is a sacred grove, 500 acres. That's the only place where we could find the miswak tree. You would have heard about this miswak toothpaste.
Yes.
Yeah, that comes from a tree called Pilu, Salvadora something. I forgot the botanical name. That tree is otherwise considered to be native to Rajasthan and Gujarat, but actually it was the same region. It used to grow up to Punjab, and only in Punjab at this place. I show that picture of that forest to almost all the Punjabis I have ever met after discovering it. I ask them where is it, and they guess where it would be, and they will tell me they would reach all parts of the world, but they will never be able to tell that this is from Punjab, because they have never seen that tree in Punjab ever. Even the people from Batinda who took us to that place, they went to that forest for the first time. So that is quite a place to visit. Then another place we discovered in Punjab, again I forgot the name, but anyways, we have the list of species published. Close to Chandigarh also we found another Nepali, I think Nepali Forest Reserve. And I have a very long list. It's not always me who would go to survey these forests, so I might not be the best person in the company to ask for it. But
but you were
that is
saying you
something
have a
that
list
interests
of
you, I can.
trees. You
Sorry.
said you said you have a list of indigenous trees published somewhere. Is that on your website?
Is there on our website. I was handling Bangalore's Twitter handle. We are Bangalore for last week. So even there I have shared the list of species for Bangalore city. So all our documentation is available on open source. So though it's our IP and we produce it on client's expense, but everything becomes
Okay.
public knowledge for education, because that's also
Yeah.
one of the mission of the company too. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's also the reason why we are doing this. Like I have had conversations with you separately because I'm very, very keen on this topic. But I do feel that, information really should be, spread as much as possible, especially when it comes to sustainability, because in any case, we face so many hurdles, right? So at least let's make information available as much as possible so that at least it's a good starting point for people who are interested in the subject. Okay, so now, so guys, as Subhendu said, if you Google, a forest and indigenous species, maybe you should be coming up with these lists for different areas that a forest has published. We will possibly put out a list of this natural forest that Shubhendu just mentioned after, in the next couple of days on our Instagram as well. But Shubhendu, my next question is that I don't want to like ask you why are forests good for us, right? Everyone should know that by now. But my question is, why don't we have forests every time for any project wherever we are dedicating space for landscaping? Why don't we just, why is, aren't we only building forests? Like, what is the advantage and disadvantage of having a forest versus simply just a landscape garden?
Yeah. I think the biggest issue is perspective. To give you an example, and I think this is an experiment all of us should do, try to find out the oldest picture of Taj Mahal on internet
Hmm.
and look at the garden in front of it. Right
Right.
now, if I ask you to imagine how the garden in front of Taj Mahal looks like, it's a manicured lawn, but it wasn't like
Yes.
that 150 years ago. Somewhere, I won't blame everything on colonization, because ultimately it was us who got changed. Somewhere our perception got changed. And
Right.
by this change of perception, our environment also got changed. So you change your perception, you change your reality, you change the environment around you. Now, today, if in my imagination, the best greenery is bougainvillea growing on my boundary wall, and I cross the boundary wall and I enter my lawn, and then there is my bungalow. It's going to happen if you have money in the pocket. But if in my perception, the best environment around me should be all the traditional, like if I pick up a bottle of Himalayan, some churan, and if I read the ingredients, I should be having all these trees,
Hmm.
ashwagandha, miswak, in the backyard of my own house. And why just the backyard, in the front yard? And why just not on the roads of my city? Why not in graveyards? Why not next to the water
Yeah.
bodies?
Yeah.
Yeah. So developing that kind of perception, we start to change. And the beauty of working with the nature is that if we take one step, nature is gonna amplify it by 1,000 times. So it's not that difficult to change. So the answer to that question, why we are not having these forests everywhere, is because somewhere in the minds of the clients and city planners and the architects is the very recent modern concept of how greenery should look like. Greenery never looked like lawns in its natural form. So we need to handhold, we need to take the Harvard Graduate School of Design, the whole class, and expose them to a natural forest so that when they come back on drawing board and designing the next Apple Computers headquarters, they put a forest right in the center of that building rather than a manicured lawn with the arborist, cutting trees
Right,
in
right.
paper
I mean,
mache.
I think one difference that I can see, and absolutely right about the Taj Mahal thing. So actually, I've done some research work on that for a project.
Yeah,
And I know that, if you look at the miniature paintings, they're actually like trees in that Char Bagh, and it wasn't just lawn, and it was really a European sort of an influence that brought the lawn. And to your point, I also feel that the lawn in India is in the climate of India is so pointless because you'll never want to sit other than like later in the evening or at night. You'll never want to sit under the open sky like that, right? It's too
yeah,
hot.
yeah,
So but as a designer, like when I'm thinking of about my buildings and my homes, like we design mostly homes, so I think that the advantage that the lawn gives me are, so yeah, you tell me if it works even if you have a forest, right? So I feel like a lawn is preferred because it kind of gives you that long vista, right? So it gives you that sense of space. It opens up viewpoints for you, whereas trees would kind of obstruct views. Second is it gives you open space for recreation. So basically for kids to run around or for pets to run around or for you to kind of, spend time outdoors. And I don't know
yeah.
if forests would give you that space as well. Um, and then the third thing I think is also that people have become very fearful of nature
Snakes.
in a way, of nature, right? So not only snakes, of course, snakes is like, a big thing. Like they all want to be connected, like all our clients want to be connected to nature, but of course they don't want snakes. But they also don't want bugs. They don't want, they're also afraid of mosquitoes breeding because you'll have damp soil, you have mulch, on the land, which will be shaded. Then they are concerned about things like even the leaf litter, right? So if there is like there'll be so much leaf litter that will have to be cleaned, so there's so much maintenance. Like I'm just telling you, these are all
Yeah,
the reasons why we would like, of what we would hear if we are going out trying to convince clients to plant more trees. Um, and of course, they want open space, right? So, I mean, so now tell me how can we convince the clients that forests can give them all of these things when they come to us with these problems?
I think it should not be done that way, because convincing client would be that we are trying to make them a compromise, and who would like to do that as a consultant, as an architect, as a designer. I should not be compromising on my client's requirement. And that's why we say that it's the onus of developing that perspective is on us. And whoever does it first will make a lot of money and will be the pioneer. Why? Because 50 years ago, nobody would spend a lakh rupees per night to stay in Amba Vilas Palace in Udaipur. Nobody would do that. They would go to the Marriotts, the Hiltons of the world, because that was the aspiration. What hospitality, if you look at the best hotels in the world, they are not the kind of the box, the manicured, uh, the
Right, right.
shiny glass buildings, they're always authentic. I mean, if you look at the best Indian hotels, they would always be Amba Vilas palaces and not the kind of, standard high maintenance rooms that you find in, because the soul lies in those properties and not in the industrialized hospitality that we see in our cities. So that's why I say, whoever is going to crack that code, when we make, how everybody's eating quinoa right now in India, and why quinoa is so expensive. It's the peasant food of Latin America, which some white person has seen and brought it to America, and now
Called
it's,
it a superfood.
yeah, it's the fad. Moringa,
Yeah,
our
yeah, yeah,
desi moringa is
yeah.
being sold in Europe, in Europe at a very high
Capsules.
cost now.
Yeah.
What else? Avocados are being eaten in Germany. Why? Nobody knows. But somebody developed that perspective that this Latin American food is good and everybody should be eating it. So I'm not saying that we have to bring in something like that, but whoever does it first. So we are in a process right now in our company, and something which we should be I mean, Instagram live is probably not the best place to talk about it, but uh, there is a synergy which I have seen in art, design, and forest. And the moment we did that, we saw that suddenly we were able to improve the revenues by 3 to 4 times per unit area of land. Why? Because we collaborated with a sculptor who made beautiful sculptures. I mean, if you go to A4S Instagram handle and see some of these sculptures carved out of stone, carved out of
I saw
wood,
actually,
yeah,
yes.
and you provide enough public spaces like a watchtower, a sitting space, a yoga space, a meditation area inside the forest. There is no way a lawn will, that space will
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
eat a lawn at lunch, lawn for lunch and a garden for breakfast, because there is no comparison. That multi-layered effect will change the environment of a place to an extent that the way air breathes in that area will totally change.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
so experiential that if somebody has tasted that for once, it's like honey versus saccharine, or sugar. You can't go back to the
Fake
the
stuff.
junk, that was around you. So the onus is on the designers and the architects of the world to show and tell. And to show and tell, the first project would be definitely difficult. But the moment that happens, it's going to create a ripple effect. We have seen it in India in last 10 years when Dr. Miyawaki planted his first forest in June 2009. By June 2010, it was grown. And by January 2011, our company was launched. And after that, for 5 years, we struggled. We went to different geographies. We were able to make it. 2015, we made it open source. And now it's like everybody is planting a Miyawaki forest. Even if they don't
Right.
know, they're still planting a Miyawaki forest. But
Uh,
it's a great thing. It's a great change that we have seen happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree. I think you're absolutely right. So the very first step is education, and the more we architects and designers are educated, the more we can actually push for, I guess, other sustainability techniques along with, creating forests as landscape spaces too. So in fact, we do have some questions where, people are saying that can we create, microforests in housing colonies that have gardens or spare land? And obviously, the answer is a resounding yes, right? But you did mention that you have made it open source. So again, let me ask you this because I really like to, basically leave people with a lot of information,
Yeah.
which they can actually use. So are you saying that on your website, on A4St's website, they can actually find information on how to create a forest, which is open source?
Yes, they can. And soon, I mean, in another month's time, we're gonna be releasing some video tutorials. Watching them, they will be able to make their own forest. We have published a lot of materials in form of books. It's in Hindi, English, Bangla, Japanese, French, Spanish. So a lot of it has already been done. Already done. A lot of it is being done right now, and in another 6 to 7 months, we'll be having a Japanese version of this video also. We are shooting them in Japan. The
Oh,
video.
wow.
So gonna hear it from the horse's mouth.
Got it. That sounds awesome. I'm going to quickly take up a couple of other questions that we have
Meanwhile, let me
here.
show you a forest. The house where I'm
Yeah.
in right now, it's a 2,400 square feet property. The backyard is around 120 square feet, and we have made a forest there. Backyard is a little more than that, I think 240 square feet, out of which around 120 square feet is the forest. So I'll try and see if my Wi-Fi supports me to take it up to there. So
I can possibly try to turn off my video. So, no, that doesn't work.
okay. So I am on the first floor right now. You can see some passion fruits growing on the creeper, which has traveled through our forest and reached here. And this is the forest. So I am on the first floor, and you can see this is a window. This is one of the bedrooms. So the bedroom directly opens up into the forest. So every morning you can wake up to the chirping of the birds.
So,
And you
but
can
basically, I only see. Oh, this is called the Indian tulip, right? This one. What is it called in Hindi? I forget. This
call it
tree.
Paras people.
Arey nahi, in Goa they call it something else. I can't remember. But this is very commonly found, right?
Yeah.
And how beautiful is the floor? Wow. Like the ground floor.
Yeah.
Oh, how gorgeous is that? So, are you saying that you don't prune this forest at all?
Not at all. Not at all.
You just let it grow the way it is?
Yes.
How lovely. And do you have any
Yeah.
fruiting trees? Like you showed us the passion fruit. Do you
Passion
have
fruit
any
is a
other
creeper,
fruits?
which was
Right.
not part of the forest, but later on
Okay.
it was planted next to the forest, so it just climbed up using my forest trees, and now you can see passion fruits hanging from the trees, though it's
Yeah, it's a very it grows like this passion fruit climber grows like crazy, right? Like it's
yeah,
very fast and
yeah.
kind of
And this is
pervasive.
some other creeper, but
This
the
alamander.
okay, I don't know the name,
Yeah.
but yeah, but the showstopper is the forest, and you can see some of the trees have already reached beyond
So do
the
your neighbors
first
complain
floor.
at all?
No, they see, this is the house next to our house, and they are happy that, or we are also happy that we have some privacy now. It's like the forest blocks the view. However, they have a complaint that some of the trees are getting into their property and littering.
See, I mean,
So
they don't
we'll
even
get it
want
thrown.
the trees to kind of, like overhang over their property. Like you would think that they would actually see a forest and be like, oh, Shubhendu, can you please come and plant for us? But it's actually the opposite. But that's exactly our experience, right? Like I have had experiences where there was my neighbor in Goa who one day suddenly got someone and started like trimming trees in our backyard. And we kind of had a forest there. And I came out and I'm like, what's happening? And she was like, no, no, I just get too much leaf litter in my balcony, right? It's too much work for my cleaning lady. And I was like, okay, you do whatever, but like the moment you reach my property, you can't touch any of the trees there, right? Um, but basically, I think people have just lost that connection with nature where nature seems alien to them in a way, right, where they feel like they need to actually distance themselves from nature because nature is problematic.
Yeah.
Um and yeah, I think I don't know how to reconcile with that, but anyways, that's another discussion for another day. So,
Yeah.
Shubhendu, thank you so much. We've had a long chat. So, unless there is something very critical in our, in the questions here, I think I would like to wrap it up. There are people who are asking about what is the healthy distance between trees. Anything you want to say to that?
We plant at a density of 3 to 5 seedlings per square meter, and we mix all the different layers. Don't plant trees that grow to the same height next to each other. Otherwise, they will fight for the same vertical space when they grow tall. So,
Got it.
uh,
So we will try to find this open source information, everyone, and we'll try to put it up on Instagram so everyone can reach it. And I want to thank you, Shubhendu. This was amazing. And once again, whenever I have a conversation with you, I'm just like, why am I not doing this on any one of the projects that we are working on? So I really need to integrate it somewhere, and I hope soon. But yeah, thank you so much for your work. Thank you for your knowledge, information, and so openly sharing it. We want to see more images, photos, and videos. So please put them up on social media and and things. And then, guys, you can reach Shubhendu and A Forest at their website and at their Instagram handle. We will make the video available on IGTV, and I will also share it with Shubhendu. I'll share it with you so you guys can share it as well. So thank you so much. Thank you. Take
Thank you.
care.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.